Recording the session. Just see there's a comment. Okay, I don't know if there's anything I can do. I see there's a problem with hearing what I have to say. I don't know if there's anything I can do to improve that. So just keep me updated as to the progress. So I'm going to record this session on the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. And as I said, the purpose is actually for us to understand why a standardized instrument is of more value than having to devise your own instrument for your research. So this is a document that I got from the internet, and many of the scale documents you will find on the internet look like this. Although I must say this one is already is very simple and it's very easily constructed. Oftentimes the scales you will find on the internet do not necessarily look as easy and straightforward as this document does. So be it as it may, I will just use this then as a case example. And then afterwards, we will do an exercise where you in your groups will take one of the examples that you got from the internet, and the whole purpose of the exercise will be for you to write up or identify the properties that are needed. So I also want to refer you to the document on Teams. I'll just upload it. The document on Teams is the proposal format. So I'm just going to upload it so that we talk about that one quickly. Okay, you will be able to see it now, I assume. I'm just going to enlarge it. Right, can you all see it? So there's a section in the research proposal format that speaks to validity and reliability. So this is the section where we talk about the research data collection tools that we will be using. So it's part of your methods, section 3 in the proposal format is the methods section. So this is where you would then report on the psychometric properties of the instrument that you will use for data collection. So yesterday I also showed you the Google form example that I used in my study. And so that was also meant to just give you that bit of background regarding what an electronic data collection tool looks like. So you will see here I have inserted in the template, I've inserted the kinds of information that you need to report on when you use a standardized scale for a data collection tool. So the headings for that are given here. So there's basically 3 sections to it. When you start reporting on the measurement scale, there are 3 aspects that you need to look at. First is the background to the scale. So this is where it comes from. You know, who developed it? Why was it developed? What is the theoretical construct being measured? You know, so it's all about the background. So oftentimes scales have been developed long ago. As you will see, the Rosenberg self-esteem scale was developed already in 1965. And but since then, there have been many other studies that have validated that instrument. So then it has a long history, a train of evidence that can help you to defend the use of the scale. And that's always a good thing. The more studies there have been done on a particular scale, the better it is. So when you report on the background, it's necessary to lift that out. Remember that research is all about defense. So you are constantly in the business of defending your decisions and your recommendations. So it is a good idea to report on your instrument's background so that others can read about, the trail of evidence that is already there. Secondly, you need to report on the technical aspects. Now, the technical aspects are the psychometric properties. Then, thirdly, you need to continue about validation information. So, what type of validations were done? Where was the latest validations done? What is the scale used for? Has it been adapted? Sometimes an instrument changes. Changes are made by the researchers when they find that some items are not stable and do not work very well. So they remove them, they put in new formulations. So you have to decide whether you want to go with the original scale or whether you want to use the adapted version. As in the case of the Technology Acceptance Survey, that instrument, the UTAUT instrument, UTAUT, that instrument was first originally developed in 2003 and it was refined, but little evidence was available regarding those changes. For example, the article where most of the changes were brought about, I couldn't find that. So there's a little bit of a gap in the information there. So validation information is important, and you need to report on that within your research proposal. Another aspect that is important that I did not talk about is the interpretation guideline. So, is there an indication of how you must score the instrument? How to score it, how to interpret it is important for your study to report on it, because you will have to follow that, or you could follow it in the way you do use the scale for data collection. So later on in your data analysis, it's likely that the scoring that was used in the original instrument, that you will use the same kind of scoring mechanism. And lastly, it's important to understand what permissions do you need to use an instrument. So sometimes you need to have the permission of the developer. And the developer has to give you a letter to say that you have got permission to use the instrument. Okay, so that is the core information that you have to write up in your research proposal. Right, so let me go back to Rosenberg self-esteem scale. Okay, and I guess you can all see Rosenberg self-esteem scale here. So maybe it's a good idea if you use the set of criteria in the research proposal that you can follow the discussion and know what kind of information you need to report on. Just a moment. Okay, I see somebody is struggling to get into it. Okay, just a moment. I'm just going to try and get that person logged in. Okay, so I have invited everybody now, so hopefully the few lost souls will also be joining us soon. Right, so the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. So this specific scale was developed in 1965, as I've already indicated, and it was developed in the US. So there you will see a description of it. It's a 10-item scale. It measures global self-worth, both positively and negatively, feelings about the self. Here we have some abstracts of selected related articles about the self-esteem scale. Here is a description. Okay, and the description tells us all about, what are the factors that are being measured. So there's a bit of information. This is all background information that's necessary to, you can only summarize it and lift out what are the key points for purposes of your study. Okay, so you don't need to do it in too much detail. Okay, some or most of the scales that you get will give you the scale and the actual item. So in this case, here you have it. The 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 items from this self-esteem scale. In the case of commercial scales, you will not be able to freely get hold of the items, and you would need to buy it or at least pay towards using it. So if you have a scale that is like that, if a paid for scale, you must seriously consider not using it because it's going to cost you a lot of money, and that's not very convenient. So if that is your only way, then obviously you use it as such. Okay, but then try to look for other alternatives. And this is maybe a good point to remember when it gets to that time where you have to decide on a certain scale. You are welcome to consult the internet, like I've said, but sometimes it's not easy to find the correct measurement tool on the internet. So if your study is focused on families or children, then I have 2 books in my office, 2 volumes that are packed with scales. So there are about close on 100 scales in those 2 volumes. So you are welcome to come and peruse those 2 volumes of scales in my office and see if you can find something that you may find useful for your study. Okay, so we have the 10 items as well as the Likert scale that you will use. In this case, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. Okay, and now this is the scoring formula, which is quite important to know. It says here that items 2, 5, 6, 8, and 9 have to be reverse scored. So reverse scoring means where strongly agree was 1 point, agree 2, disagree 3, and strongly disagree 4, you just put it the other way around. Okay. And the scoring says you have to just simply score all of them, all the 10 items. So that's very easy to do. So make sure you understand how to do the scoring for the instrument, because it then is necessary. Once you have collected the data, it's necessary to do the scoring for each respondent. Well, I mean, with a spreadsheet, you can do it automatically. Okay, so that's not too much of an issue. Okay, so that you have the scoring, and that will help you with the data analysis, the statistical analysis. You need to have a total score for your instrument. So the question is, why do we need to reverse score items in an instrument such as this? Why 2, 5, 6, 8, and 9? So let's have a look at these particular items. Let's start with number 9. Number 9 reads as follows. All in all, I am inclined to feel that I am a failure. So just by reading this item, you will understand that it should either be positive or negative. So this sounds like a pretty negative statement. Okay? So reverse scoring means that you are actually turning it into a positive item. Why? Because the other items, except these 5, the other items are positively formulated. Take, for example, this number 10. Item number 10, I take a positive attitude toward myself. So in order to make all the items point in the same direction, in the same positive direction, they advise you to reverse score the negative items. So why is that? This is just a design feature of the scale, meaning that it was designed to be like that, to be positive. Okay? So a positive scale means the higher the score, the more positive you are with regard to the contents of the scale. So if you have a number of negative items, they actually distract from the positive. Okay? So therefore, reverse scoring has to be done. So let's see number 8. Number 8 is the same kind of negative phrasing. I wish I could have more respect for myself. So once again, they want you to reverse score it. Otherwise, let's just take, for example, item number 10. So if we take item number 10, you will realize I take a positive attitude toward myself. It's kind of likely that your average Joe Soap, the average person, would say, well, I actually agree with this statement. I actually feel positive about myself. I have a positive attitude towards myself. Okay. So you would more likely find people answer with agree or strongly agree, and less likely that people will say, I disagree. In other words, disagreeing would mean that you actually feel negative toward yourself. Well, unless you probably live in South Africa, uh, I think most people take a positive attitude towards themselves. So it's likely that you will find agree and disagree. Now, with this number 9, question number 9 says, all in all, I'm inclined to feel that I'm a failure. Now, answering this strongly agree or agree, you will find that most people are likely to say, I disagree to that. I'm at least not a complete failure. There are some individuals, isolated individuals, who will probably say, yeah, I am inclined to feel that I'm a failure. But most often people will likely disagree to this. So now if you take these two positions, you will find that most people will answer this, disagree or strongly disagree. And to question 10, most people are likely to rather say, I agree or strongly disagree. So these two are opposing each other. So from a scoring perspective, that's not a good idea. So therefore, because the one cancels the other one, all right? So all in all, we want to have at least a reliable estimate of your self-esteem. And therefore, the developers have specified that you have to reverse score negative items and turn them into positive ones. That's only for purposes of scoring the instrument. And then you will see that the way to interpret it, and here it is given as a very simple way to do that. The higher scores indicate higher self-esteem. Okay, so that helps you, to understand how you must interpret the instrument. Okay. Now this is a very simple instrument. Okay, it's very easy to score and very easy to use. Sorry, is there a question? Somebody wants to say something? Okay, right. So do you get the idea about how you must report on the scale? Now, this particular report that we have does not give us the psychometric properties of the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. So for that, you need to go to some of these articles to find those properties. So for now, I'm just going to go back to that other form of ours so that we can check it out. Right, just a moment. Okay, so now it appears on your screen again. So from your additional articles, you need to get this information about about the reliability. Okay, that's very important. We need to know whether the scale was reliable and to what extent was it reliable. And also if there is any additional validation information that you can supply regarding the validity of the instrument. So I want to refer you to this particular chapter on data, quantitative data collection. And this will be chapter 12 in the textbook. So chapter 12 gives you information about the measurement instrument. Okay, so all the detail that I'm talking about is provided in chapter 12. Okay, chapter 12 is also about sampling, so it's not entirely correct. And 11. So chapter 11 is actually the chapter where you will get the information regarding how to formulate your questionnaire, how to design it, and what to look out for when it comes to the use of standardized scales. Right, so I would like you to use this form just now for your exercise that you are going to do, your group exercise. You can use this form. It is on Teams, so you can use it for doing the exercise. I just want to take a moment to get the validation article for the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. So if you just hold on a moment, take a small break. I'm just going to get that scale and then I'll be back. Okay, so what I've got here is just a quick search on Google regarding the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. So I thought I had the article, but I don't have it in my own directory at the present moment. So I want to just show you that this was just a keyword on the Rosenberg self-esteem scale, Cronbach Alpha. Okay, so there are some articles in Google, very well cited articles. This one is 1,700 times that it was used. So in those articles, you will find some information about how it was validated. I spoke about the different articles on further validation, and here is one that was done by means of Rasch analysis, a comparison of reliability and construct validity using the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. There's another one. Here we have some internal consistency figures. Here is a PDF on a ResearchGate. Another one, psychometric properties of the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. Okay, so there is a lot of articles here is one from 2019. So you can appreciate the fact that there is a lot written, and if I just go on to the next page, you'll see there are many articles that focus on the validation of the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. Here is one on the item wordings. So all that I'm saying is that you must make sure that you don't get lost in all the information about a scale. Okay. So getting lost is not uncommon, because now what do you take and what do you leave? What articles are important and what articles should be left out. Like any literature study, doing a literature study on your scale helps you to understand whether it is safer to use the original validation data or, on the other hand, use the most recent ones. So either way has its own problems. So if you use the original version, like I've explained the original version here, you ignore the fact that there's been a whole trail of evidence that shows, that shows how it was validated in more recent ways. You will also then ignore the fact that there were actually items that didn't function or that were changed or whatever. So you first must do a bit of reading before you decide on what version of the instrument you are going to use. It is a bit of a minefield, but my advice is that you do a bit of research, just look at it. So this is then regarding this example, but the whole idea is that you must do your homework well. And when you use an instrument for your research purposes, you must report on its properties. So I'm now going to let you do a little exercise where you are going to use your own instrument, and in your groups I'd like you to take one of the examples now, the one you don't have to use all of the examples you got from the internet, but let's say one example per group. So you use that example and you use the form, the proposal form, to look at what are the properties, to report on the properties. So what you can do is you can use the template, download it, and just type in your information in there. So I'm going to give you about half an hour to 45 minutes. You are going to come back and each group will just do a short presentation on the measurement instrument that they have selected. And then, we will have a brief discussion on that. So here is another opportunity for you to show your good research skills in this course. Are there any questions before I switch you over to your groups? Meanwhile, the groups came back and are now ready to report back on their progress. Okay, so it just has the 15 items. So and you just add up by summing. I think that's what they said. So I assume if it's only 15 items, it will be a unidimensional scale. So what does that mean? That I think is a question we need to just ask ourselves, and maybe some of you will have wondered, what does it mean if we say multidimensional or unidimensional? So in essence, the scale a scale has a number of items, okay? But a scale can also be divided in sections. So if you have like section A, B, C, and D, it's likely that each of the sections will measure part of the larger idea or concept that is being measured. Okay. So if it has more than one section, you will know that or realize that it is a multi-dimensional scale because each section reflects a dimension of that concept. So, for example, if our concept is attitudes towards sexual abuse, the myths, if it consisted of 4 sections, you can safely assume that each section is kind of independent. It measures a facet or a dimension of sexual abuse myths. So that is something to look out for. In terms of your study, sometimes it's good to only use a single dimension, a unidimensional scale. So one that has only one section. But sometimes it's good to have more than one because it just gives you a better view of the concept that you are measuring. So if it is sexual abuse myths, then the more dimensions you have, the better view you have on the whole concept of child sexual abuse. Okay, so that is then about the dimensionality of the scale. So in your case, it had 15 items, and we are not sure whether it has more than one dimension. So that is something you can work on if you were to refine this assignment. You would go for and explain the different dimensions to us, because that will just give us a bit more detail. So your question is about internal consistency. So the internal consistency is a different word for reliability. So reliability means the way in which a person or in which people answer a questionnaire. So internal consistency means it's actually a statistical measure of the reliability of the scale. So reliability means that the questions were clear enough so that most people could answer them in the same way at different times. Okay, so if I give you this scale today and next week and the week after that to complete, and your results tend to be the same over that 3-week period, then we can say the scale has a reasonable internal consistency for you. So you completed it reliably. Every time you completed it, your scores were more or less the same. So over time, when you repeatedly do it, it is quite reliable. It's like driving your car. So if you start it up this week and it runs fine, it's okay. If you start it up next week and it doesn't want to start because the battery has run flat, it's not okay. If in 3 weeks' time you start it again and it's not starting because the battery is still flat, we can say your car is not reliable. Okay, you cannot rely on it. So it's the same with measurement tools or scales. If it works every time, it means it's quite reliable. It's consistent in what it's doing. People also have consistency. So if your wife tells you, or if your partner tells you today he or she loves you, next week she doesn't love you, and the week thereafter she doesn't, and the week thereafter she loves you again, that love is not consistent. Okay, so this is just a simplified metaphor for saying that a scale also has a kind of a reliability, and that's called internal consistency. So internal consistency is measured by means of Cronbach's alpha. It is just a score. I think you had it as 0.77, if I remember correctly. So that is just a number that is allocated. It's like a percentage. If it is like 0.77, it means the scale, there it is. The alpha, the Cronbach alpha for the full scale is 7.64. Okay. Or 0.7, it should be 0.764, which means it's about a 76% reliability. Okay. So the whole idea is that the higher the reliability, the better it is to use the instrument. And that's what we look for when we assess your research proposal is, do you use a scale that has at least good reliability? So the other one that you have there, retest reliability, and 4 weeks. That is just the score for, the reliability estimate for if you test the scale over time and you use it at different times, retest reliability. So it's also usually given by means of a number, or a percentage. So that all depends on the instrument that you have chosen. Okay, thanks. Thanks for your presentation. I want to give another group a chance. Let's go to group number three. Group number three, are you there? Okay, but thank you for that piece of information. I want to just comment on it. Yes, I think what was perhaps missing is you did not really go into the all those other articles or the other evidence. So I just want to say, going back to the previous one, and then also about the Rosenberg. So it's important to understand whether it is multidimensional or unidimensional. Yes. So you mentioned it was unidimensional. What I liked about the previous presentation also was that they spoke about local validation studies. So obviously that instrument was validated in South Africa at some point. Maybe it originates from SA, I'm not sure. So that is always a good thing if an instrument can be applied locally. Because we always have a problem, especially with the whole emphasis of decolonization and indigenization. We need to have instruments or use data collection instruments that have been developed locally. So they must have a local relevance. Otherwise, it's not to say that it's going to help you a lot to use it. Okay, so if there is evidence of local validation, it is very positive and it can actually help you very well. It makes it better. Okay, but thanks for your initial information. What I was missing then, what you need to do is to look at information regarding the validity and the reliability still of that instrument. What you have given us is about the factor analysis. So factor analysis is a technique that is used to determine the underlying empirical dimensions of a measurement instrument. As you know, most phenomena that we study in social work is of a multidimensional, complex nature. Something like gender-based violence. There are many dimensions to it, and if you analyze that concept, you will find there are many components that together can be defined as gender-based violence. So, similarly, if you want to measure gender-based violence, it's not possible to measure it by means of a single question. You cannot have a scale with only one question, and that measures the whole construction of gender-based violence. Would you agree with me? It's not possible. It's not realistic to do it that way. You need to have more than one item. So the very least, the lowest number of items that you can use to measure a construct. You hear my term, a construct. In other words, an idea such as gender-based violence, or a concept as such as gender-based violence. The smallest number of items you can have to measure the single construct is 5. So between 5 and 7 is actually your lowest number. So in order to cope with that, designers or scale developers develop their scales to have more than one dimension, theoretically. And then each dimension has its own group of items that measures it, that measures that dimension. So usually a multi-dimensional scale means that you have a few dimensions, and usually you can add up all, let's say there are 3 dimensions, you can add up the scores for all 3 dimensions to get an overall score. Or you can look at the dimensional scores and understand that each part of the concept has its own little measure. I don't know how to explain it further, but this is how I could explain it. It's like saying there are 9 students in a class, together they are the class, the master's class, for example, but individually they are a dimension or a subsection of the larger class, a little sample. Okay, but jointly they form the social work master's class. Okay, so that's maybe the best way I can put it at this stage. Okay, can we have... Okay, okay, so will you please let me know if there's anything I need to clarify? Okay, let's go to group 1, room 1. This is Christoph, Machete, Sandy, Deirdre, Rula. Aha. What was that? The, okay. Yeah, but did you find anything on it? How reliable is that instrument? Could you find any evidence of that? Was there any information that with the scale, that that showed you the Kronbach alpha, that showed you how reliable it was? Okay, so it is just that you needed more time to do it. The information is there, you just need to identify it. Okay, okay, no, that's fine. Yes, is there any other information you need to give us there? What about permissions? Yeah. Okay, 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 okay. Yes, yes. Can I ask, is this material on scales and the use of scales in research, is it new to most of you, or did you all know about it, or is this completely new stuff? For you, for instance, Rulani, is this new? Because now you have to do it. Yeah. Okay, so it feels not impossible. You think you will grasp it, but in order to do it and to understand it, you actually need more time with it, and also more consultation. Okay, no, but you guys must not be hard on yourself. You are doing very well already by just reaching this stage of the game, and still not feeling completely lost. All right, that's important. If you feel, okay, this is new, it's at another level, that's okay. But as long as you don't feel completely lost, you're still good. You're in a good place. And exactly, okay. No, 100%. So thanks a lot for this presentation. And for the whole class, I want to say to you, this is like a bird's eye view. We are flying over these concepts so that you can at least at the end of that say, oh yes, I've heard of this. I know about it. I'm not sure how to do it, but I know we've done it, So by the time you get to your own research proposal and you start developing that and the method in that, and you are then confronted with the choice of using a scale, by that time you will be able to consult more frequently and read more, and then it will start falling into place. So I have an understanding that if you say it's a bit overwhelming, but yeah, you just need more time. Okay, so thanks for your presentation, Rulani. I appreciate it. Are there any comments or questions from the group regarding this point? Okay, so just remember you'll get back to it. I think assignment 3 or so, that's where you develop your methodology. That's where we will come back to these matters. All right. So yeah, so that's where I think we are at. Okay, so in conclusion, what is it that we need to understand from this whole exercise this morning? Point 1. If you are going to do a quantitative study in reality for your research, one, you have the choice, or you must decide whether you want to design your own questionnaire or whether you want to use a standardized scale. So what I've said is that for certain studies, especially those that are not descriptive but are more group comparative, or even those studies that are more advanced correlational type of studies, in those cases it is advisable that you use a standardized scale. Okay. In order to use a standardized scale, you need to understand what its properties are in order to evaluate whether you can use it or not. And that is what this exercise was about. So when you select your scale from the internet or from another source, that is the time when you also need to gather evidence about its validation. And that evidence will enable you to evaluate whether you can use the scale for your research or not. So, strictly speaking, it is very important to select a scale that has sufficient psychometric properties, and that scale must help you. Yeah, so when you select the scale eventually, that is that should be based on appropriate evidence that it has been tested properly, that it has the necessary psychometric strength so that you can use it. And that's all I wanted to establish with this specific section. Okay, so colleagues, our time is slowly running towards the end. I actually have one more section left before 1. And you all know now that we will only go on until 1 o'clock today. That is now after your requests, and after this survey that we did. So we will give you some time to reach the campus from 1 o'clock onwards. Okay, so we will finish at 1, and thereafter those people who need to get to campus can then, start the traveling thing. So I'm giving you the afternoon off for traveling. Okay, so there's one section that I still want to focus on for today, and that is all about qualitative design. So we've now concluded with quantitative designs. We've looked at all the different design types in like a bird's eye view, and so that you now know there are different ways in which you can approach a quantitative study. So this next section is about the qualitative designs, and for this lecture I base it on the appropriate chapter in the FOSS for now, which is chapter 14. Chapter 14 is about qualitative designs. It is called thematic inquiry in qualitative research. It is not the be all and end all. You can also read chapter 15, which is the narrative inquiry. But can I just ask you, are you all happy to continue now, or do you just need to take a short break? Maybe you can just wave at me if you want to have a break at the moment. Okay. I'm happy with that. So let's just take like a 10 to 15 minute break, and I will resume the meeting then. Okay, colleagues, I think we can resume. Right, so the next lecture is all about qualitative designs in social work research, and it's based on chapter 14 and 15 of the textbook, and it's all about thematic inquiry. That's the terminology being used in this instance. And this is actually the equivalent of the quantitative sections we had with the different quantitative designs. So now it's all about the qualitative. So if your study happens to be a qualitative study, then you can use some of these approaches to, some of these methods to as your design choice. So let me say that at first, the whole idea of designs in qualitative research was not commonly used. There was more that idea of the qualitative paradigm. So the qualitative paradigm is not actually a design, it's more a philosophy about how you approach qualitative kind of studies. So in the older literature, especially the fourth book from 2005 and so forth, that was kind of the philosophy. But that has changed, and nowadays there is equally there's equally importance attached to the idea of using designs or specific designs in qualitative research. So today it's not uncommon to speak of the qualitative design. So this chapter 14 is a bit of the old and the new, in the sense that if you read that chapter, you will find qualitative research in the view of these authors is quite a bit more towards the older philosophy that says that the qualitative research process does not specifically utilize a design, but is more like an orientation or an approach. Be it as it may, today we move with the times. So today we will select a design for qualitative studies. And my bit of advice regarding the idea of designs, qualitative designs, is that in this case you go with a specific author. So there are some notorious qualitative authors, well-known authors such as Creswell. And Creswell is one of those iconic qualitative researchers who brings out a book every year or two and, moves with the times. But there are different other authors as well that can be cited. I can't give you the names right now, but if you go to the second floor in the library to the research commons, that is where you will find numerous textbooks on qualitative research. So I suggest that if you want to use a specific design, such as the qualitative in-depth interview design, if you want to use a design like that, then you follow the author who wrote a lot about the qualitative in-depth interview design. Okay, so nowadays there are different variations that you can follow. So, for instance, you will have the qualitative in-depth design, but then in another textbook you would find it described as the exploratory descriptive design. So really the choice is yours, and like I say, the different authors are not it's not consistently the same. They all more or less imply the same kind of approach to qualitative research, but they shape it into a design. They write about it as a design. So yes, repeat again, if you want to use a design in qualitative research, go to your author and stick with that author. Do not mix the authors, because there's like a philosophical difference amongst these authors. Okay, so the four designs that are mentioned in chapter 14 are phenomenology, ethnography, grounded theory, and the case study. So those four are portrayed by these authors in chapter 14 as the most general types of designs for qualitative research. So another concept I want to clarify is the fact that in qualitative research we work inductively and not deductively. You remember our discussion about that in previous workshops. So mostly we have in the qualitative approach we work inductively, but this is also it's not completely always the case. Mostly that is how it is done, but sometimes it's not exactly like that. So you will hear me often say about qualitative research that it's not as standardized a method as it is in quantitative, right? So let's start then off with the the whole concept of design. So this is our philosophy that we want to portray about it. Namely that the design in qualitative research is not so rigid as in quantitative designs, and you can adapt it to your own purpose as you go along. Therefore, the qualitative design is more considered an emerging process that is constructed dynamically during the formulation of your proposal. And you as a researcher and your ontology, your position is as much part of the design of the study, because you are the collector of the data, so you are very much part of it. Research takes place within a conceptual framework, a framework of definitions that guide the study. So in a qualitative study, remember that qualitative studies use an ontological approach, and that means you are not going to do much of a literature study in the beginning with a qualitative study. You will do a literature overview, yes, but you will not necessarily do the full literature review. You will not necessarily do the full literature review, and therefore, yeah, it is just considered an overview. So once you have this conceptual framework, so you have your concepts of your study unpacked and described, then you start building the method, the qualitative approach, and that's where you start using a certain design choice. You start following that, and you write within that selected paradigm. So if the study is phenomenological in nature, that will be your paradigm, your approach to the research, your design. And the whole idea of good qualitative research is that it is meant to build the existing body of knowledge or conceptualization. And yeah, that is what you aim to do with the study. So you gain understanding of the relationship amongst different constructs and your theoretical framework. So you start off with the theory in much as a conceptual framework. It is supported by your methods. Sampling is also determined by your developing theory or your paradigm, your position, the size of the sample, the kind of choice, how you're going to select the sample. All of that depends on the nature of your study, how that will happen. So in qualitative research, just like in quant, there must be congruence between your research questions, your strategy, and your methods. They must all line up into one. So qualitative research is also about having different perspectives on the same phenomenon. That's why two people can study the same phenomenon and find entirely different perspectives on it. So in general, the qualitative design is more considered a research strategy. It's a strategy on how you will collect your data. And in that regard, the textbook mentions you are flexible, and it's an interrelated process, so it's adaptable from the beginning to the end. It's not always fixed. There are existing strategies that are just adapted and adjusted for your own specific study. So there's some kind of there's more flexibility in a qualitative approach to research. It's not so rigid that you have to follow a certain design type to the T. You can adapt it slightly to your circumstances. Right, so the first design that we would like to bring to your attention is that one that's called phenomenology. And phenomenology is all about the day-to-day lives of your participants. And the whole idea with phenomenology is that it is about a person's immediate experience of a situation. So that experience can have a temporal, so over time it can change. So it has a temporal emphasis. It is your life world. So this week, how you experience things may be different to how you experience it next week. So phenomenology is seen as a major strand of qualitative research because it is about your everyday life, your daily circumstance, and how you experience that. So, phenomenology can also be divided into two types. The one is descriptive, and the other one is interpretive phenomenology. Descriptive means that the person only describes his or her experiences to you as they come up in his mind. But the interpretive phenomenology is also captures also the participant's interpretation of his experience. So it's not only the experience, it's also his interpretation and reports on it. So that's just a philosophical difference between two different ways. I was just interrupted by the clock here. What I said is these two types are very much related. These two types of phenomenology, they are very much related, with the exception that the first one only describes the experiences, and the second one, the second interpretive phenomenology, allows the participant to interpret these experiences and relay that to you. So that's the only difference between the two. The second one is ethnography. Ethnography is just another way of, or it's actually the way that anthropologists do their research. So anthropology is the study of other cultures and nations, groupings, cultural contexts. So ethnography is actually quite important within social work research because sometimes we need to do studies that are culturally relevant, that occur in a specific geographical or cultural context. And so the purpose there is it's all about your understanding of the cultural context of the participant. So that's what ethnography helps you. And the person within their own context makes the most sense. And that unique experience is what you are trying to capture with an ethnographic kind of study. Ethnography means that you also have to join your participants in that context. So you join their lives, their life world. Sometimes this is done by physically moving into the community that you are studying. So sometimes a researcher will stay, for example, for 3 months in a particular community, all the time observing, writing up what they see, discussing with people, conducting interviews. And they do that in order to understand that context, to develop a good sense of understanding. As far as ethnography is concerned, there are also two types. There is the classic ethnography and then also contemporary ethnography. The classic one is it just refers to a period in history where certain philosophers made a particular impression on ethnography, but contemporary ethnography is what is described as residing in the dynamics of hermeneutics. So hermeneutics is just a new term that was invented, uh, which says that it's basically just interpreting what you see within a community. The reflexive approach is also part of contemporary ethnography. Reflexive meaning that you, as the researcher, will from time to time reflect and think about your own position relative to the ethnographic or the cultural or the ethnographic context that you are observing. A term that is as much prevalent in ethnography than in phenomenology is that term of bracketing. So, bracketing is just the ability to reflect on your own position relative to your subjects. And the whole idea of bracketing is to reduce the possibility of bias in your observations. Ethnography, I think, is very useful for social work research because it really gives you a contextual understanding of the way people live in a certain setting. However, ethnography has its limitations. So if you intend doing a study that has a geographical relevance, then this could be your methods. And once again, what I have just explained to you is just the bare basics. There is a lot more information, and there are specific authors that write about ethnography and that are well known in that field. So if this is your thing, it requires some more research to understand exactly how this method can fit your study. The other one that is fairly well known amongst social researchers is called grounded theory. So, grounded theory says that your theory about your explanatory theories, so how you explain phenomena and how you explain situations that you observe, all of that is done by means of theory, and that theory emerges from the data. So typically in a grounded theory type of design, you would go back to your participants quite frequently, and the idea of the study would be to develop a theory about people and their situations. So, as an example, if you want to develop a theory on cultural ways of dealing with sexual abuse, so you have a theory about how certain cultures work with the concept of child sexual abuse, how they view it. So, a grounded theory could help you in designing that theory, developing that theory. So grounded theory studies can often be inductive or deductive. Deductive means, okay, it is positivist, it's a positivist kind of perspective, but deductive qualitative studies mean that theory plays quite an extensive role in that research. Although it is qualitative, you still use a theory to interpret your data. So then it becomes deductive. So the grounded theory method or design also implies that you have to go back to your participants frequently, recruiting new participants to help you understand a particular situation and build the theory indirectly. So that means you go back frequently to continue sampling until your theory is saturated, and that's the point that when you stop. So your sampling is also based on what you need. You actually need people who can inform you about your theory. Remember that in a grounded theory study, your objective is to establish concepts, to define and describe concepts. So if you have discovered new ways of behaving by people, then you would do this kind of grounded theory. So you have to think frequently whilst you do that kind of study. You have to think about your own situation and how that influences the theory that you are developing. There's also nowadays the option of developing theories in a constructivist manner. Constructivist here means that you start from scratch. You don't have a theoretical idea, and just by interviewing people, you begin to develop this kind of theory about the people and the way they function. Okay, the last one is the case study design. So the case study design is also frequently used in social work research, but it has some kind of limitations. The one thing that is often forgotten with case study design is that it involves multiple data sets, not only a single data set. All right? So it means you need to use different sources of information for your case. The idea of a case study is that you have to understand a geographical case or an organizational case or a grouping of people that you want to focus on, that you want to understand that case very well and in depth. So you need to be familiarized with all facets of complex behavior that people elicit in certain situations. The case study then focuses on events or situations that people have been exposed to. So let's say we have a case study that is focused on the case of people that have survived COVID. Right. So then that can be your case, and the case study, helps you. The case in itself must help you to understand that situation better. So all avenues, all different ways in which you can gather information about the case should be used for case study purposes. And usually this then involves more than one data set. Right. And so that is the case study design. Like I said, there are multiple other designs. These authors basically divide the main designs in qualitative research into this four. So on page 305 and 306, we have a table. We present you with a table of information about the different designs and the assumptions under which you use them. So you can go and read that. Right. And that then concludes the lecture on different qualitative designs in social work research. Right. Any comments? Yeah, you have to. And that's actually quite a relevant question. So I've just started projecting the rapid review application form. So I'm going to run through that now to answer your question, because you within a rapid review you actually also need to pick a design. The only difference is that with a rapid review, since you are reviewing studies, your design will not be focused on a kind of interviewing, okay? Because that's not going to be relevant. So your design is more of an analysis design. So think of it this way. In a rapid review, your participants are not people. Your participants in a rapid review are articles. So you need to have a design for selecting them, probably, a sampling plan. But the actual focus is on how you're going to analyze, and the analysis part is actually the thematic analysis. So in most qualitative designs, the method for data analysis is thematic analysis. I say usually because usually that is the case. And what it entails is you will conduct interviews in a qualitative study with live human beings, or as in the case of a rapid review, you have your articles. And after having interviewed your respondents, your participants, that data that you have captured needs to be converted into written text. And so a transcription has to be made of the interview. And that gives you the written textual data that you can analyze. So most, or actually all qualitative data has to be converted into text or pictures, and then that is your data for analysis. Okay, so does that answer your question? Okay, so let's just have a look at this proposal format for review studies. You will see that it's actually the same as a normal research project application form. Okay, so the first part is the same. I'm not going to stick along there. The second section, which is the scientific proposal, that's where maybe the change comes into it. So you will have, similar to a normal research project, in a rapid review, you will also have a contextualization and a problem statement, and the section regarding the contribution of the study. But you now understand that rapid reviews are used to explore a phenomenon from literature or to explore the best possible methods for intervening. So best intervention methods. So there are multiple uses for rapid review, but these are the two most commonly used ones. So your question will be not a research question, but a review question. So what is the question you want to answer by means of your review? As an example, you could say, what are the characteristics of adults that sexually abuse children? What are the personality characteristics? What are the social characteristics? Okay, so that could be your review question, and typically the answer of that would be found, or you would go and find it in the literature. If you formulate a review question in terms of an intervention, you would say, what are the most optimum intervention methods for victims of child sexual abuse? You know? So yeah, that is then your research question or review question. Similar to any research project, your rapid review will also have an aim and objectives. So let me just say something here. The fact that you are doing like MSW research, a mini dissertation, often means that your study can only have an aim as well, and that would be fine. Or else one or two objectives together with an aim is still is fine. So now the review approach is addressed in the following section. And in here you have a synopsis of the different kind of reviews that you can follow. Here you can see qualitative analysis is one of those. So a rapid review can be approached qualitatively, or it can be a mixed analysis, qualitative and quantitative, or meta-analysis or synthesis is more of a quantitative approach. Right. So you have a choice which one to follow. Registration of the research protocol. So rapid reviews can be registered with a recognized body for systematic reviews, such as the Cochrane Institute or Prospero. These are two online organizations. You can go and look at them. You can Google it. You can register your project, and then that means they will publish it, or that they will have it available for people to read. And in brackets it says this is compulsory if the aim of the review involves the impact or effectiveness or comparison of interventions or any brand name. So it's better then to register the project. It gives it a certain formality. Also, it helps you to understand whether any similar reviews are already underway that address your topic of interest. So this helps you to avoid wasteful duplication of effort. The search strategy is where you now indicate this is actually the same as identifying your population and your sample. So in the search strategy, you have to indicate the databases that you will be using, and there can be different ones. The keywords. So we recommend that you do develop the keywords at different levels. So level 1 would be social work or children and sexual abuse, for example. So you can have a complex string of words, keywords, that you will use to do your whole search for articles. Okay. Now, can you see that so far we have not used any design, qualitative design? So this is only for planning and structuring your study. Those of you who want to do a rapid review, obviously you will go into more detail here, and your study leader will give you some guidance as to how to develop these search terms and keywords and so forth. When the scope review has been done, the scope review is a study that you do to see how many possible studies can you identify. It's like having a list, and you would say that after the scope review, you would say, okay, I have available 300 possible articles, and or I have 200 or whatever the case may be. So that is just to show that there are enough articles available for purposes of your review. Obviously, the time range is also important, and sometimes the time range is determined by when was the last time a systematic review was done on the concepts that you want to do it on. So if you have found a previous systematic review that was done 10 years ago, then it's okay to do another one from 10 years ago onwards. So 2011 onwards. Target participants or population group. So this has to say, okay, this could be confusing, but the target population group could be, the age group that of patients that present with a certain mood disorder, or any age or specific condition, that all determines your group of people that the article should be relevant to. It's just another way to delimit your search so that you do not get everything that's under the sun, but that you have it kind of focused onto something. A further focusing strategy is whether you will include or exclude the following levels of data. So will you only use full text journal studies, or will you use peer-reviewed studies only, non-peer reviewed, qualitative? You can decide whether you want to include or exclude them, as long as you give a valid reason for that. So then, once you have now a selection strategy and you know how you want to get to your articles, you have to devise a method of determining the relevance of the article. Okay. So the method has to be described, and there are different methods of doing it, you can have like a table with criteria, and this part, this determining of relevance, is almost the same as having inclusion and exclusion criteria for participants in an empirical study. It's the same thing. It's just what will be the criteria for determining whether an article is relevant or not. Will you only look at the title? Will you look only at the abstract, or title and abstract, or will you use some other form of evaluating whether articles fit or don't fit the sample? Then there must be a quality appraisal. Quality appraisal means you have to have a method for establishing the quality of the articles that you have. Not all articles are good and should be included. Some articles must be excluded because they are not good, or they are contain insufficient evidence, or whatever. So there are some standardized quality appraisal tools available, and these are regulated by different institutions. So they are either you use the NICE, the ADA, the PRISMA, or the EPI. These are recognized questionnaires that help you assess the quality of an article. Usually your reviewers, and in the case of a rapid review, you have about 2 reviewers, you and the supervisor. So usually the reviewers each have to score or appraise the articles, the sample of articles, individually on their own, and then they come together and see, whether there is consistency between the two writers regarding the articles that are of quality or not. And then you must have a procedure for determining how you will deal with differences between the writers on the quality of the articles. Okay, so that's like sifting. So you are checking out which articles are good enough to take further and to analyze. Then you extract the data in 2.9. The extraction means what fields, what kind of information are you going to extract from the articles in preparation for analysis. So if it is quantitative, then it's important to identify that in this table, such as sample size, findings, the level of conclusions, and the motivation why you want to use those criteria for extracting data. And then lastly, at 2.10, that's the 9th step in a rapid review. That's where you start doing the data analysis. So this is really where the analysis will usually be. If it's qualitative, it will be thematic analysis. And you have to write up exactly how you want to do that analysis in the rapid review. So now about ethics, and that's maybe an attractive part of a rapid review, is that it contains minimal ethical considerations. So there are some precautions, and there's 2 articles you can look at. So you have to write it up, but it is less stringent than in empirical research. The chances of damaging people through your research is very small, and but there are some risks, and you have to consider these the ethics about that. Similar to a normal research project, you will have a research budget and a time frame for when you want to complete the study, and also what kind of structure or report you are going to follow. Then lastly, your references. Okay, and that is what your proposal looks like. So can you see what I meant initially is that a rapid review is the same as an empirical study, except that your subjects are books and theses and articles and so forth, whereas in a normal empirical study, your participants will be the ones that you are selecting. Okay, So this is the rapid review. Easy, isn't it? So is there any questions about it? Any comments? Are you happy with that? With the rapid review, will you be able to complete that form and develop your proposal along the lines of a rapid? Right, no questions? Okay. So colleagues, I think that we have reached the end then of this workshop, and I have a little job for you, a task for you to complete, and I will upload it now. I would like you to do a short individual activity for me, please. And what I mean by that is I need you to briefly evaluate this workshop. So I want to ask you if you can take a piece of paper, or you can type it on your screen on your Words program, you know. But will you please look at this individual activity? Please reflect on the past day and a half and indicate to me the following. What area you found most interesting and why? What was the most difficult section or content? Please speak about the relevance of the workshop, the clarity of the information, and what needs you may have regarding, or problems you have, or needs you have regarding maybe connectivity issues, network inadequacy, I don't know, whatever issues you have. So will you just write that for me on a piece of paper, maybe? Or in the comments, wait, let's make it easier. I think each one of you, what I'd like to see from you is if you use the chat function. Yeah, maybe do that. So just type in your comments to this individual activity, please, your response to that. I just need to know whether everything is working well and whether we are going somewhere, whether we are reaching our objectives. Ne? So there you have it now, clearly on your screen. So please use the next couple of minutes, like 10 minutes, to just formulate either in a chat or in a document that you can post to me, whatever method you want to use. But you have now 10 minutes to quickly write me a response to these questions, and then I will now leave you to that, and I will come back to you in 10 minutes, and we can close the session. Okay.